Stars podcast. My name is Alexis Highland. I am the manager at Parrot Stars. And as always, I'm joined by Avery. And
Hello.
today we are launching into the topic of what to expect when buying a parrot at Parrot Stars.
Right.
So, as many of you know, we have a large variety of parrots available for sale at Parrot Stars. And something that we've been very passionate about since our inception and getting started at Parrot Stars is making the purchase of a parrot as low stress for the customer and for the parrot as we possibly can.
Right.
And although it's taken us about 6 years to really have a concrete outline and format for how we are approaching the sale of a bird with somebody, we finally have a really good explanation and kind of layout of how somebody can investigate the idea of getting a parrot and making a decision that feels right for their household and their family, but then walking them through the requirements that we have as the bird seller to make sure that we aren't only making a decision that's good in theory, but a decision that's going to provide the parrot with all of the right enclosure setups and training preparation necessary for them to have a smooth transition home.
Right.
So I think it'd be good to walk through the buyer experience and their perspective leading up to what then would be our requirements if they were ready to move forward with the purchase of a bird. So we do a lot of education. I think that's pretty
Right.
apparent in the content of our podcast so far. It'd be quite apparent to anybody that came into the store that what we're going to try to do as a store is really slow down the decision-making process and talk through a lot of the pros and cons about why or why not adding a companion parrot might be right for the household. And we have a lot of different species
We
that we
have
work with.
yes, I think that's something that's extremely unique about Parrot
Mhm.
Stars is the actual number of species,
Mhm.
not only individuals, but species as well, which is really exciting for a lot of people because they've never seen the majority, in
Mhm.
fact, of the bird species that we have. And sometimes we, especially myself, I take it for granted as we get into the routine. But it's really spectacular to see all this. But what I'm getting at is when people do come in looking
Mhm.
for a forever parrot companion and the research they've done at
Mhm.
home, they're like, oh, wow, a Quaker would be great. And then they
Mhm.
show up and they're like, oh my God, this is,
A
this is,
loud bird.
this is, well, not only that, but just all the other like
Oh, all the
exciting actually seeing the
yes.
species in person.
Mhm.
Because then there's the Quakers, the green cheeks, the cockatiels, the parrotlets, and then your bigger stuff. And so that's another aspect that we really walk people through, which
Yeah.
kind of gets into people do come with these preconceptions
Mhm.
of all the things like, well, Quakers are a little noisy and, but they're great family birds or stuff
Mhm.
like that. Well, you know, that could go for any species.
Right.
Not to throw a wrench in the plans of the people that come, but it's true. And so it's really
Mhm.
up to you, the
Yeah,
buyer. And I
exactly.
always tell people, and of course, what you always say as well, and the rest of the staff that work with customers, is it comes down to personal preference. Like, we're
Yeah.
not going to tell you which species to get
Mhm.
because, then it's not, I don't know the word that best describes it, but authentic,
Mhm.
maybe, if that's correct.
Mhm.
But you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and when people well, I assume because I've been pretty far removed from the position of needing to buy a parrot
Yeah.
to add one to my life. But the common approach for people is that there's an urge to do some online research before they commit to adding a
Right.
parrot to their home,
Which is great.
which
Yeah.
is great. We encourage people to really think through the decision and take a lot of different perspectives into consideration when they're trying to narrow down their choice. But the thing that we're always trying to remind people of is that parrot ownership in every aspect is very subjective. There's no concrete way
Right.
to successfully own a parrot, or there isn't necessarily a right or wrong choice for you or your family as far as the species that you're adding to your home.
Right.
So, we always caution people when they're starting their online research to take everything they're reading with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And something that I've experienced through talking to all different levels of parrot owner experience. So, people who haven't bought a bird, people who have just started owning a bird, or people who have had a parrot in their household for many, many years.
Hmm.
Their experience or their opinion, philosophy about that particular species or their experience with their bird is very much their unique perspective.
Exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes I think that gets a little bit murky because if they've had a really positive experience, let's say, for example, a green cheek conure, since that's a species that so many people are gravitated towards when they're searching for a new family member if they've never had a parrot before. So, and I think many people that have done research about green cheek conures would agree that depending on the blog you're reading or the site you're on, people may have very, very positive things to say collectively about the species. And then you hear things that are not so
I know.
attractive about that particular
The
species.
very biased Facebook like pages and
Yes.
groups, which is
Yes.
fine, but like you said, it's based off of personal experiences.
Mhm.
And we say that to the people that come in looking for a companion parrot. They come in with all this wonderful research that they did. And then we say, it comes down to your commitment to
Mhm.
actually train this
Yes.
very complex animal. And that's why we're doing this, because these are very complex animals. But when you say that, they're like, oh, well,
Mhm.
it both opens up all the other species because, like, if it's based off just my actions, then I can handle anything,
Yeah.
But then it's also like, well, if you've never had a parrot before, we're not going to send a macaw home or something.
Yes.
So it's a hard balance, but still, our philosophy is you determine the bird's behavior, and if you come to the store with that in mind, I
Mhm.
mean, I think you're going to have a wonderful experience in finding a forever parrot companion.
Yeah, and so much of your experience as the bird owner is going to be dependent on that positive reinforcement training that I caution people to remind themselves of that when they're reading and doing their initial research
Yeah.
because and I'm not speaking about all parrot owners, but I would say in my point of view, like I said, talking to the different stages of parrot owners and talking to lots, I mean, hundreds of people, I would have to say probably more than average or higher than average number of people that are putting information about particular species out there on the internet have probably not done positive reinforcement training.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that I want to remind people of when they're reading content online that somebody's written and it's not peer reviewed and there's no research behind it. It's not a closed study where there's measurable results. If they haven't done positive reinforcement training, maybe that's why they're experiencing biting behavior
Yeah.
or lack of boundaries, destruction of the household, incompatibility with one or multiple members of the household.
Right.
So be cautious about those generalizations, those sweeping perceptions about what a certain species might be like, because often those quote unquote negative behaviors or undesirable behaviors are more likely the parent not having somebody guide them through positive reinforcement training to teach them alternative, more preferable behaviors. So keep that in mind as you're doing research. If you keep hearing the phrase bitey, territorial,
Yeah.
feisty,
Even even sometimes loud.
loud,
Yeah,
yes, that's
the
a good point.
volume. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have to be tolerant.
Prepared.
You have to be tolerant of a pretty decent threshold of volume with all parrots. But this kind of stuff that we're talking about you hear online doesn't define
Hmm.
every. And going back to parrots are complex, dogs can be set with certain
Hmm.
behaviors because we have bred that particular breed to
Yes.
do that. However, parrots, because they are still technically these wild
Wild.
form,
Hmm.
that it's individual basis on
Hmm.
their, kind of the behaviors that you can look forward to, or
Hmm.
I'm kind of beating around the bush, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah, you have to be
It's
cautious. I think,
a blank slate, I guess. That's kind of what
yes.
I'm getting at with parrots.
Yes. And because so much of what may um, cause someone to perceive their experience with their companion parrot as possibly positive or negative is based on that positive reinforcement training, they may be quick to assimilate to something they've read online.
Yeah.
So if they haven't done the positive reinforcement training and then they get bit, and then they have this flashback to an article
Yeah.
that they read that said, again, our example, the green cheek conures are bitey. Now it becomes this self-fulfilling
Yeah. It's
prophecy.
like, oh my
You
gosh, it's
are,
true.
yes, you might be manifesting the
Yeah.
idea that the parrot is biting because you read that this species may or may not be bitey. Now that's something you've experienced, and now we're going to label that individual within the species as a bitey bird.
Yeah.
And our job at Parrot Stars is to remind you that no behavior is ever set in stone,
Right.
and your experience has nothing to do with other people's experience.
Yeah.
If you keep yourself grounded in positive reinforcement training and taking away other people's ideas and their pressured point of view and remove it from your personal experience, more often than not, your long-term experience with your parrot is probably going to be a lot more positive.
Yeah. Spend the time researching positive reinforcement
Yes.
training rather than the, subjective opinions of certain species. And yeah, listen to our podcast.
You hit
um,
the nail on the head. That was right where I was going to go with it.
yeah. So
It
there was a customer the other day that came in, really nice. But at the end of all that we go through with purchasing a parrot, which we'll dive into, they said, I don't really want to train. I just want to let the bird kind of, just vibe. They literally said, I just want to let the bird vibe. Well, that's great, but like we're saying, you training is essential to
Mhm.
establish both control,
Mhm.
obviously, for not only convenience but safety,
Mhm.
and two, building that relationship. Just letting your bird vibe in a house can really
Yes.
create some undesirable behaviors that we're trying to get at.
Yes. And when it comes to a person's evaluation of their experience with their parrot, the thing that I try to remind people of is that, and we've talked about it on this podcast, is that our human nature is quite complex.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to offend anybody by saying this statement, but some individual humans are just simply more empathetic and better at reading animal behavior and signals that the parrot is giving better than others.
Yeah, that's true.
And so when you read online that somebody has had a phenomenal experience with their companion parrot and never did positive reinforcement training, or they kind of brush it off like it wasn't that important and it didn't contribute to their success or satisfaction with their parrot, I just caution people to also remember that that unique situation is probably the result of positive reinforcement training, even if they weren't
Right.
intentionally doing it in clicker training sessions with a clicker. Because positive reinforcement training can also be quite subtle.
Yeah.
You can reward a parrot without having it be this very distinct clicking sound. So there is still an awareness or a intention to reward the parrot in moments that it's behaving desirably. So it really is not optional, and it likely has happened
Yeah.
even if somebody says they haven't done positive
I know. We get
reinforcement
that.
training.
We get that all the time. They said, "I've never trained my bird, but my bird steps up and will recall and do all these awesome stuff." It's like, well, you did, but
Yep.
you're just not like having a regimental, training routine. So
Yes.
positive reinforcement training isn't like a set thing where you got to be like, okay, let me pull up this program and follow all
Mhm.
the exact rules and stuff. It's just a generalization of a strategy that is used to get the best results
Yep.
for reinforcing behaviors.
Yep.
There's tons of ways of doing it. Watch our podcast.
Yeah.
But but there are better ways. But anyways, not to get too far off of the purpose of the episode, because as you can see, training is huge
Mhm.
that we really advocate for and really push on to all of our customers, no matter who they are. And it's something that everybody can learn, but once you're dedicated to learning that process, it doesn't matter to a degree of which species
Yeah.
you want to take home.
Yep. And so when people call and ask for our advice about a particular species that they're interested in, or maybe they have no idea what species they should be interested in, we have to be quite blunt with people, and we'll be blunt with our listeners. But the most important thing to consider is going to be what is actually within a budget that you're comfortable spending.
Right.
So often there isn't enough emphasis online about how much initial investment there is, along with just whatever the price is for the parrot itself.
Yeah.
So, yes, parrot prices can quite easily be found, but something that we're going to really urge people to remember is that you are also responsible as somebody buying a parrot to invest in an appropriate size cage
Yes.
and tons of toys, tons of perches, and not necessarily just multiple toys and perches, ones that are meaningful.
Yeah.
So, chew toys and foraging toys, dynamic perching, perches that are more natural, or rope or sandy, or all the different things that are going to help maintain good foot health. The food and the diet, training rewards, foraging rewards. So, it is a package deal. And
Hmm.
we really try to emphasize to potential buyers that having that investment for all of those items along with the parrot are not optional. There are different paths you can take to make it maybe more or less affordable.
Yeah.
You can DIY quite a bit.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of the food that would be very enriching and nourishing for your parrot in an affordable way. There are options to get previously used cages. So we're
Yeah.
not trying to make the purchase of a parrot a sales pitch,
Yeah.
but we are going to be so strict and adamant that people are not sacrificing the investment they're making to provide the parrot a really phenomenal setup if their budget is kind of capped at whatever the price is for the parrot.
Right.
So if, for example, your budget is $1,000 and that's what your budget is for potentially everything involved with having to bring home a companion parrot, your parrot cannot be $1,000
Right.
because you're going to not be able to accommodate all of the different things that they're going to need when they first go home.
Yeah.
So we always kind of start there, and we're not telling people how or why they should spend their money, but the way that I kind of approach it is this is a want, not a need. Okay, we're choosing to add these companion parrots to our homes. it's then therefore our responsibility to provide and budget for all of the things necessary to give that parrot a really phenomenal setup.
Of course. And that's, that's the main idea, to
Mhm.
make sure that the birds are as comfortable as possible. I always tell people, poor
Willow,
Willow, just totally deprived of.
honey, you gotta go lay down.
Aw.
Okay,
But I
Willow.
always tell people, which kind of puts it into perspective, at least I think, and then they respond in a positive way. So that's why I keep saying it. But sometimes it can be a little intimidating when you
Mhm.
come in and then the bird is 700, and then, and then the cage, the toys, the perches can add on
Sometimes,
700
yeah,
more.
double the price of what you're spending on the parrot a lot of times.
But if you
Mhm.
go into it thinking, even if it's a surprise, but go into it with this mindset of whatever you provide your bird is all your bird has,
Mhm.
you know, because people are like, oh God, I can't get like 5 toys, or I can't get these foraging treats because that's pushes it past. But I'm like, well, if you don't get that stuff, then your bird doesn't ever have that.
Yeah.
And the environment that your bird lives in is all it's going to experience.
Mhm.
So you really want to have as enriching of an environment as possible to make sure that these birds are just, quite frankly, bottom line healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's our job, and especially it's a new year, 2025. We collectively, as parrot owners and people that are choosing to raise and keep these animals in captivity, need to do better. And the cool thing is that if you are investing in all of these important elements of parrot care, the cage, the toys, the perches, the food, our hope is that we're changing the culture of this minimalist idea of parrot ownership. I think we have to be really blunt and transparent on this podcast that
Yeah.
there is undeniably a large number of parrots that are kept in captivity as pets that receive the bare minimum food and water and
I know.
maybe a perch to sit on. And that just cannot be the standard anymore.
Right.
People have to start looking at the investment in the cage as we should be getting the largest cage we can possibly manage.
Right.
It should always be the largest cage possible while still maintaining the right bar spacing so the parrot doesn't injure itself. And if you really look at it in that way, that it's not the cheapest cage, but rather the best cage for the parrot, again, your long term success with the bird is undeniably going to be improved. And our hope is that if more and more people are investing in the larger cages, now that's going to be the standard and the
Mhm.
expectation rather than what we're still trying to combat a little bit with what we experience on a day to day is the kind of minimalist idea that, okay, if I bring home a parrot, I can still get a small cage because my goal is to keep it out of the cage all the time. Okay. The intention behind that philosophy is fine.
Yeah.
And in future episodes, and we've already dived into it in past episodes, that doesn't mean you shouldn't get the largest cage possible.
Right.
There's still going to be parts of that parrot's life where it's going to be in that cage, and it has to be the largest cage you
Right.
can manage.
Yeah.
Plain and simple, with as many dynamic perches and toys as you can manage.
Uh-huh.
So, I guess that might be a good segue into kind of going through the breakdown of our expectations. So, obviously,
Mhm.
we've kind of covered the unofficial first element of our process and what to expect from Parrot Stars,
Right.
which is going to be us helping you really work through some of the myths about parrot ownership and getting to the real root of why or why not you should be getting a companion parrot
Right.
and helping you kind of think about it in a way that's really functional for your budget and your household to make a decision that's right for you as an individual and right for the specific parrot you're choosing and not necessarily dependent so much on other people's success or generalizations out there.
Yeah, of course. And with the part that we talked about earlier about researching the species, we're not saying don't do that.
Yeah.
Definitely put in more time to the actual training research part. But for species wise, still make sure that if you do have a
Mhm.
couple in mind that you think would be really awesome based off your opinion, what I'm getting at is if you do come to the store and say, do you have a green parrot that
Mhm.
talks, which sounds goofy and stereotypical, but it does happen.
All the time,
We
yep.
will say no. At least I do.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyways, but yeah, so there's a lot of stuff to really think about before you actually jump into the process,
Mhm.
which I guess we can dive in now of our actual on words on a poster in the store, our
Point by
purchasing
point
requirements.
expectations. Yes, so I think a lot of different bird stores and people selling parrots are starting to trend towards having more requirements, but at Parrot Stars specifically, we have non-negotiable requirements that we hold everybody to. Like
Mhm.
every person that's walking out the door, regardless of how many parrots they've had in the past, what their experience level is,
Right.
if they've purchased a bird from us in the past or not, there's so many things that may cause somebody to think they're exempt from these requirements. And for us, it does not matter. It is a non negotiable. We are going to make sure that we go through these requirements for every single parrot that leaves our building.
Yep.
It's our responsibility because ultimately we are choosing what happens with these animals. We are the ones that are electing them to be pets and going into a home situation. I feel that it should be across the board, the breeder and the store or the seller, whatever category you fall into. If you're the person allowing the bird to go to a pet home, it should be everyone's responsibility to, at bare minimum, go through these four things
Yeah.
that are, in our opinion, essential.
Mhm.
But at the very least, we're going to try to hold ourselves to a really high standard. We're making this content available to everybody. So
Yeah.
if any bird breeder, seller, storefront wants to use these ideas and copy them word for word, we do not care. Like this is meant to be something that is improving the standard of care for everybody and all companion parrots.
Yeah.
So this is not something that needs to be exclusive to Parrot Stars,
Of
but
course.
it's going to be something that if you come into the store, you are going to experience it if you are trying to leave with a bird.
Definitely.
So,
So, number one,
yes.
before we even, at least what I try to do, before we even go into the showroom
Yes.
where all of our birds are located, if you're coming to purchase a bird, you must provide proof, if you already have one, of an appropriately sized cage for the
Yes.
bird. And so there's no surprises. We're already halfway done, and they're like, "Oh,
Mhm.
well, show me the cage." And then the cage is like a little 18 by 18 for, I don't even know, any species.
Yep.
That's too small for any species, quite
Yep.
frankly. And so you must be prepared to purchase a cage if you don't have an appropriate sized one.
Mhm.
That cage must also be equipped with 4 to 6 plus natural wood perches and 4 to 6 plus chew/foraging activities or toys.
Mhm.
That's minimum.
Mhm.
More the better,
Yes.
and bigger the better for the cage.
For
But
sure.
those are the first number one requirement.
Yes. So, proof of caging, ample toys, and perches. If you are listening to this podcast and you are thinking about potentially purchasing a parrot from us, something that we often suggest to people is waiting to purchase the cage until they arrive at the store.
Right.
And we are a small business and we try to have as competitive pricing as possible, but we do have a huge inventory of styles of cages. And even if you end up not purchasing the cage from us, the nice thing about waiting to purchase a cage until you come to the store is that you get the visual of all the different example size cages. So it can get tricky when you're trying to purchase a cage online because the images are not always truly representative of the size cage
Yeah.
or the appropriate species for that cage. You and I see it all the time
I
that they've
know.
photoshopped a macaw into a cage that is frankly too small for a
But
parakeet.
yeah. Yeah.
So the nice thing about waiting until you come into the store is that we can really thoroughly explain to you why it's so important to invest in the larger cages. And then
Right.
you can really evaluate hands-on the different styles, the shapes, the bar spacing. You see the parrot in the cage where all of a sudden you feel, wow, a flight cage still doesn't feel sometimes big enough
Right.
for the species that I'm looking at.
Mhm.
So it does help really give you the visualization of what an appropriate size cage is for the potential species you're interested in. And again, we try to have competitive pricing. Even if you don't end up buying the cage from us, I think there still is a lot of value in looking at the cage in person. Now,
Yes.
for all of our remote customers or people that are looking for advice on caging and they don't have the luxury of traveling into the store,
Right.
we can still really help narrow the field by helping double check dimensions on the cages. We do this for a living. We've looked at thousands of different cages from all of the different manufacturers. So we are pretty familiar with most cages that are available online in the US.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind too, that if you have to buy your cage online because you don't have a bird store near you, we can still help guide you through what we'd consider kind of the minimum cage size for the species you're interested in to make sure you don't go through the purchase of a cage just to find out that ultimately it is too small for the species you're getting.
Right.
But we are not shy about it and we
Yeah.
do not sway. So if your cage is not the right size, we will we will still let you maybe purchase a bird, but we will not let it leave the building until we have proof that the cage that you are going to have the day that it goes home is going to be the appropriate size. So we do require picture and video proof with the tape measures and all of the good
Yes.
stuff.
All that good stuff.
Um, and in my opinion, that should be the standard.
Yep.
If you're selling a parrot, you should be doing whatever you can to guarantee that the person is not going to go home and put it in a tiny cage that's way too small.
Yeah.
So,
I guess I'll just say right now, if you do have an 18 by 18, you should probably just get
yes,
rid of
if
it.
you
Don't
are
sell it because then that means somebody else is going to have it. And
true.
then
And
or don't buy
again,
it.
Avery and I tend to be ones that are like, we're going to change the parrot world for the better.
Well,
It does kind of stem from the cage manufacturers and sellers as well. Our hope is that if we can urge people to stop buying the cages that are too small, if the
yeah.
demand for the small cages decreases, maybe then all these cage companies are going to be less incentivized to produce cages that are too small. That just should be the case
Yep.
across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you see, we're very adamant about this.
Yes.
We will
This
say
is
no.
huge.
We don't have to sell you a parrot.
Yes. This is a want, not a need. Okay, so if you are also in a position where you have not invested in your toys and purchase, same thing. It is not that we're trying to monopolize the purchase of your parrot and all the things that go along with it.
Right.
But we have a huge storefront with literally thousands of products
Hmm.
that we've already evaluated for you as products that are really beneficial to your companion parrot. And we, again, can coach you through the pros and cons of the different perching and why it's so important to have dynamic perching. We can help you build your cage to really function well for the species you're going to put into it. And then when it comes to toys, again, it's too much for us to even dive into in this moment in this
Yeah.
episode. We probably have to devote an entire episode to it, but there's so many different types of toys and reasoning behind why you invest in a variety of toys that with the one-on-one coaching that we provide at the store, we can really go through all of that with you. So, even we've had examples where customers have shown us their proof of toys, but they're all basically carbon copies of one another. There's 6 toys, which technically would be our minimum, but we are still going to be quite demanding that we do think about having a variety of toys available for the companion.
It is kind of funny. All of them from a distance look the same, but when you get closer, there's literally
There's so
there's a
many reasons.
function for
Yes.
every single.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets fun,
Mhm.
honestly, because really setting up that cage, the best that you possibly can for the bird is what's going to be best for the bird,
Yes.
but also fun for you.
Mhm.
There was a customer, just an example, the other day that came in, had parrotlets,
Mhm.
not from us, said, my parrotlets, like, I don't want to put perches in there because I don't think they look good. This actually happened. I don't know if
Mhm.
I told you. I was like, can you say that? Like what?
Mhm.
You don't think it looks good? And then maybe. Anyways, I don't want to get into it because then I'll start yelling. But these are essential for your
Yes.
parrot's health. This
Mhm.
is not aesthetic. This is not something that is just fun for
Mhm.
your bird just to be like, oh, that looks nice in there.
Mhm.
This is actual requirements for your bird's well-being.
Absolutely.
Natural wood.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you just need to keep going back to this is about the bird, it's not about you as the buyer. It's if you are choosing to put the parrot in your household, it's your obligation to make sure that the enclosure is appropriate.
Mhm.
So another t- requirement, we'll dive into number 2.
Number 2.
We are very adamant that parrots should never be transported in cardboard boxes.
Mm,
And unfortunately, that is more or less the industry standard.
yeah.
That's how parrots are transported out of big box pet stores. And functionally, they are not safe because any parrot with a hooked bill can chew through cardboard like without any hesitation or
Yep.
delay. So,
They're
from a
done.
safety standpoint, they're not ideal. From a stress standpoint, there's very rarely even anything at the base of the cardboard box for them to have traction during the transport.
Yeah, sliding all around.
So, our requirement is that parrots must leave our building in a travel carrier. They cannot leave in a full size cage. They must have a transport carrier that is small and enclosed and is going to help reduce stress
Mhm.
and going to hopefully, God forbid, if there were an instance where the person had to brake suddenly or the carrier shifted in the car, it's going to help protect the parrot from moving too much during transit.
Yep. Appropriate size,
Mhm.
a carrier as well.
Mhm.
If you already have it, make sure it's clean. I mean, you
Yes.
shouldn't have to say this, but unfortunately,
We do.
a
Mhm.
lot of carriers come in and it looks like it's been through. Never mind. I don't even know. You get the idea. It's just
Yes.
awful. So please clean the carrier if you already have one.
Yes. So, and this is again another area of investment. We
Right.
have so many options of carriers, and we're going to tell you to try to wait to get your carrier until you come into the store because each carrier has a different design
Yeah.
and some carriers have different functions. So, yes, theoretically, they should all be able to safely transfer your parrot from location A to location B, but certain ones are more cage like but small, so that if you wanted to have kind of an outdoor enclosure that's going to be totally safe for the summertime, there's carriers that serve that purpose. And then there's the traditional cat carrier where it's
Yeah.
enclosed but totally safe. And maybe if you have a high stress species or individual parrot, that might help because it removes a lot of the visual distraction during transport. So there's a lot of different styles of carrier out there, but it's important that they
Yeah.
do not leave our building in cardboard boxes. And same thing, it's worth investing in because you're going to need to take your parrot places. Sometimes we hear
Yeah.
that feedback too is like, well, I'm only going to bring it home and I don't really plan on taking it anywhere. Well, one, you should. Two, if you need to ever have grooming, vet visits, go on vacation, whatever it is, there are going to be times that you have a carrier or you're going to need a carrier. And in my opinion, every parrot owner should have a carrier prepped in case of emergency for easy transport in and out of the home.
Yeah.
So it's worth the investment, and we will make sure that each parrot leaves our building in a true enclosed travel carrier.
Yeah. If you take care of it, it's a lifelong
Hmm.
investment. So it could be potentially a one time if you get a good high quality carrier
Hmm.
cage. So number 3.
Yes.
Number 3 does open up a door into a whole nother topic and world, which we did cover
Hmm.
kind of the surface of in a previous episode. But we do require you to purchase at minimum the food the
Hmm.
bird is currently eating.
Yes.
Um,
We are going to really encourage people to invest in more than the baseline food.
right.
And we do encourage people to go back and listen to episode number 1, which is nutrition,
Mhm.
where we do a really in-depth breakdown of the different classifications of how we talk about parrot food. So we kind of have different categories.
Yes.
And same thing. In our opinion, all of those categories are not optional.
Mhm.
You have to be willing to invest in your parrot's health. And you, again, are choosing to have the parrot in your home. And you made a really good point that what you provide your parrot is what's available to it in the wild, where they'd be foraging for all their different nutritional needs. They're in control. But as parrot owners, it's our job to make sure we are creating a dynamic diet that's going to contribute to their long-term mental and physical health.
Right.
Now, most of the time we are selling birds that are young, and it's kind of twofold. One, we think that the diet that we're recommending to you is the most optimal option available in the market for companion parrots. It's super dynamic. It serves a lot of purposes. It doesn't necessarily force you to have a very specific diet for your companion parrot. Our hope and our goal is that we've exposed our babies to so many different colors, textures, flavors that they are really good dynamic eaters for you.
Yes.
But you've got to be willing to invest in keeping the parrot on the same food that it's used to. The transition to the new home is going to be stressful enough,
Right.
where it's going to be in a new cage, new people, new environment. We have to make sure that the food stays the same,
Yeah.
because if they are exposed to unfamiliar food, then you don't want to risk them
Right. It's a
not
shock.
eating it.
Shock to the system. And there's a lot more other stressors that need to be mediated before you switch up the entire diet that they
Yeah.
were weaned onto, quite frankly.
Yeah. And this is something that I'm not shy about kind of getting on a high horse about, because sorry, but if you are getting a companion parrot, you shouldn't be buying the cheapest food out there.
Right.
And I know that becomes kind of a contentious thing, because humans tend to regard themselves as kind of like the superior species. And in my opinion, if you're having a pet in your household, you should be committed to providing it the best diet you can
Yeah.
manage. And again, if that's a budgetary limitation, that's when the conversation needs to start going towards the direction of, should you be even getting a parrot at that point?
Yeah.
If your budget isn't going to allow you to invest in quality food, you shouldn't be getting a parrot to start with. And the same argument could be made for people getting cats and dogs. Like, if you can't afford the yearly vet visits, dental care, good diet, time to take them out on walks, then maybe that shouldn't be a pet you're looking at. And so for parrots, where we know with certainty that diet is such a huge contributing factor to their long-term
Oh, yeah.
mental and physical health, if your budget isn't going to allow you to invest in all of the things that are going to keep it healthy, then maybe this isn't the right choice as a pet for you.
Right. It's always red flags when people come in and are like, how much is this bag of food? How much is this bag of food that
Mhm.
we have to get?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you don't have to get a parrot.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're having to penny pinch at
Right.
the end
Yeah.
and sacrifice the quality food, then we chose a parrot that was too expensive for what your budget really allowed.
Right.
So if you're not able to afford basically all of the things that we're going to recommend, and again, we're not trying to capitalize off of this.
Yeah.
We're a small business, and the whole purpose of what we're doing is to educate people.
Hmm.
It's not that we're trying to make more money off of you. It's that we have put years and time and effort consulting with veterinarians, nutritionists, e- experienced bird owners, and the suggestions that we're making are not to try to make a buck off of you. It's because they actually are important and contribute to the success your parrot's going to have in your home.
Yeah. Quite just the general health.
Yes.
If you're,
So,
uh,
at the very least, we are going to force you to purchase the food that the bird is currently eating, but we are going to really reiterate over and over and over again while you're with us that the other things that necessarily aren't required for you to purchase are still not optional. Like you
Right.
still have to be choosing to get these things. And you can do it thoughtfully over time. So if you're all of a sudden towards the end of your budget calculation and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't have enough money in my bank account to afford the species that I really want, plus all the things that are going to have to go along with it."
Mhm.
That would be a great opportunity for you to stop and continue to save up and invest in the and wait until a moment where you can make the appropriate investment. There's
Yes.
no rush. I mean, that's the other part of this that's exciting for people is that you can really take your time with your decision and not have it be stressful.
Right.
So if the experience of purchasing all the stuff is making you have that like
Yeah,
money anxiety and you're like, "Oh god, am I making it?"
it doesn't
That
need to happen.
yes. What I guess a good way of putting it is like what Avery and I and all the other staff members at Parrot Stars are gonna try to do is try to help you avoid getting that buyer's remorse where
Yeah.
all of a sudden you walked in the store, you're spending hundreds more than you anticipated because we're going to be so strict about our requirements that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I spent all that money. Did I make a right choice? Our goal is to really help you think through the whole decision so that you feel comfortable the whole time.
Yep.
The experience should be extremely enjoyable and positive, start to finish.
Yes.
And if at any moment you as the buyer are feeling anxious and something's not feeling right or you're getting that kind of hesitation, that's a great time to read the situation and say, okay, maybe the timing is not right for me and my family at this moment.
Right. I think that's a good segue into number 4.
Yes.
So number 4 is something that is we're all passionate about. And I
hmm
think it's the really one thing that sets us apart
hmm
compared to many, many other businesses out there that
hmm
concern parrots is our send home process that we do with everyone,
hmm
despite past bird experience, whether you've had a dozen parrots for 50 years or zero bird experience whatsoever. We sit everyone down for the same process
hmm
where one of our staff will go over tons
hmm
of information. And you were just talking about that, potential nervousness or buyer's remorse, maybe. Like, we will lay it out of what you need to do.
Yes.
And what you need to do is said in constant talking for for
Two
about
hours.
2 hours. So, but it can be overwhelming, and we recognize that. But it is all essential information to really get you, but most importantly, your new companion parrot off to the best start possible for the health, safety, and well-being of the bird.
hmm
So we go over household hazards, of course,
hmm
first, and then we talk about our what we call our take-home checklist,
hmm
which is what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 pages of just
Do's and
tons
don'ts.
of do's and don'ts, relationship building, training
hmm
strategies. We talk so much about training, what to do when the bird first gets home, all that kind of stuff.
hmm
That's usually the bulk of the send home process where we really dive in. But it's not just a lecture; it's meant to really educate, but also kind of conversation as well,
Yep.
because we really want you to ask questions, you to give feedback, all that kind of stuff, so we can set you up for the best success possible. Then, of course, we go over the our new and improved diet
Feeding instruction
feeding
sheet.
instructions sheet, where we go over everything, like we just mentioned, of all the stuff that is, quite frankly, necessary and required for
hmm
your bird to be bottom line healthy. And then, of course, our official
Transfer
transfer
agreement.
agreement of the language that we're giving one of our birds over to you. It's always going to be our bird,
Yeah.
but it's
Okay, so
I know there's a lot right there.
well, I think it's a good the reason that we structure and we call it our send home. So if you call the store or you listen to the podcast, and we've probably already said that phrase before, but we call it the send home because it's again the all of the stuff that leads up to allowing somebody to leave the building with the bird and
Right.
when we send it home to the new person. And again, it's our final opportunity to really help you as the buyer think through the decision fully.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's no commitment made until you've walked out the door with the bird. So if the conversation is intimidating or you feel that it's not, maybe it's more than you initially signed up for, that's the purpose of this conversation. Is we want you to feel like you have an opportunity to really think through things thoroughly. And I think something that I really pride myself in is that we've maintained it as a one-on-one experience for
Yeah.
the staff member and the customer.
For everyone. Yeah.
And although, which again I'm grateful for, it has become sometimes in on weekends especially kind of like a more classroom setting where we might have multiple families working with an individual staff member. It is meant to be a collaboration still. It's meant to
Yeah.
be an opportunity that if a customer has a question, they can ask it in the moment. And if there's something very specific to the species or the individual bird that we know really well because we know the baby,
Mhm.
that we can like elaborate or highlight or emphasize a little bit more for the customer for what they will anticipate for the bird that they picked, it's hopefully going to flow and feel really comfortable. It's not this kind of strict classroom
Yeah,
like,
lecture.
yes.
Just you sit down there and listen to us
Yeah.
regurgitate all this stuff. It really is meant to help you the best way possible. And especially when it is more one-on-one experience, we can really dive into your specific species.
Or experience level
Well, yeah,
too.
that's true. Yes. So we try to take into consideration of all degrees of that kind of thing so we can help you the best we can.
Yep.
So,
And I think with the household safety, we really want to, it's like a 9-page packet, I believe.
mhm,
It's again something that every seller of parrots should be providing a potential buyer of a parrot.
right.
The household safety thing has always been something that we've done from the beginning. We will continue to do. It's free information that's available to anybody that wants it. But unfortunately, we hear issues that people have who bought their parrots elsewhere. And it's always this regret of, if I had only known,
Yeah, I know.
I could have avoided this. So the idea of our 2-hour send home conversation is to really try to create a successful relationship with the parrot from a safety standpoint, the nutrition, the behavior, just feeling comfortable with the purchase you're making. Every element is really thought through. We're trying to really create an environment within your household that's going to facilitate the safety and success of the companion parrot for you.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll lay it out for you, like, and I don't know how to describe it. We'll kind of hold your hand through it
Mhm.
sometimes, but sometimes we'll just lay it out like a lot of people come and get birds. Well, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the bird to get home and, let it out and fly it all around and,
Mhm.
start doing all this fun stuff. We tell everyone and what everyone must do that bird should actually, for its well being, its comfort, its safety, and also your safety, for that bird to stay inside of the enclosure
Mhm.
and we've set it at a minimum of 7 days.
Mhm.
And that's kind of sometimes the most difficult one for people to be able to process and then follow. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Mhm.
But it's something that you're really gonna have to acknowledge that there's
Mhm.
gonna be a lot of work put into this new companion
Yeah.
family member. Um, and so yeah, I mean, we really dive into that kind of stuff.
So the reason that we've created the take home checklist, because again, this is 6 years in the making of why we have the point by point breakdown of recommendations and requirements for people when they leave, is because we've had so many opportunities from to learn from people's experience when they first take the parrot home. And if you purchased a parrot from us maybe 3 or 4 years ago and you're listening to this episode and you're like, gosh, that does not sound like the experience I had.
I know.
We aren't trying to say that we're perfect. This is a learning process for us too.
Right.
We've kind of cultivated what we think is the best situation and opportunity for you to have success when you take your parrot home. But that doesn't mean things aren't subject to change over time too. The
Right.
more we learn, the better we can help you prepare your household for a companion parrot. And for what you mentioned, the example, like one of the things that we highlight the most is keeping the parrot enclosed in the enclosure and cage for a minimum of 7 days. The reason that we recommend the 7 days in the enclosure is because people, or I guess the culture online, is that people think if you're investing in a hand fed baby bird, it should be ready to go and ready to be loved upon and ready to love you
Yeah.
when it goes home. And that's a myth that we're trying to really break, and hopefully will eventually have a trickle down effect to having people have way better and more realistic expectations of what to experience when they take home a companion parrot. Yes, there's advantages to hand feeding a baby companion parrot if you want to try to alleviate a lot of the instinctual stress that a parrot might have and when being handled by a human. But that is not does not mean that just because you bought a hand-fed baby parrot that you should immediately expect
Yeah.
the bird to be quote unquote friendly. It does not
Yeah.
mean that. So, when we're making the recommendation to keep the bird in the cage for 7 days, it's creating patience in the customer.
Right. Not only for the bird's
Yes.
sake, but yours as well.
Yes. And there are people that, yes, are maybe going to have more difficult personalities. I think the average person that we're working with
Yeah.
is really well intentioned.
Oh, yeah.
You're investing, hopefully, lots of money, time, and emotion into the purchase of this companion parrot. And the advice we're giving you is to help make your experience rewarding.
Exactly.
Because even though you, as the bird owner, by reaching in the cage and trying to give it a head scratch or wanting it to come out and fly around, the intention behind that is really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
It can have negative side effects if it's not done in a thoughtful and really careful way. So, we want you to redirect all of your excitement and that intensity that you have when you first bring home a companion parrot and kind of funnel it into the actions that are really going to help contribute to the parrot feeling more comfortable, more relaxed, within its new enclosure, but then also facilitating an opportunity for it to trust you on its own terms.
Right.
Just because you trust it and you're not afraid of getting bit is not enough of a reason for you to stick your hand in the parrot's face.
Right.
It's got to be going at the pace that the parrot is telling you it's okay with. If the parrot is calmly coming towards your hand to take a treat, okay, we know it's choosing. But if you're having to force the parrot to take the treat from you because you're actively pursuing it, we know that's not
Yeah.
we're not there and we're not ready yet. So that's why we have that take home checklist. It's because we want to have something that you can have as a written document that you can refer back to about what am I supposed to be doing in those first couple days. But also, it's written on, I think, every document that we give that we really have an open door policy about calling us with questions
Oh,
after
yeah.
the bird goes home, too.
Of course.
That we are going to hold your hand, like you said, throughout that whole purchase experience and make you feel really comfortable while you're with us. But it does not mean that we close the doors behind you and say, oop, good luck, you're
Yeah.
on your own.
Don't call us. No, that's not the truth. Yeah, no, by any means. And it does come full circle. Like
Mhm,
what you're just go back real quick, what you were saying. It all comes down to your, of course, discipline with
mhm.
your very complex companion animal you're going to be taking home, but positive reinforcement
Yeah.
training. All that stuff that you said about, the head scratches eventually, maybe. I don't want
Mhm,
to say that's ever a guarantee,
mhm,
but also the flying around the house or stuff that you want to achieve. You can't achieve that. We're not saying that's never going to happen.
mhm,
But like we're saying, you can't just jump into it.
mhm.
Practicing that positive reinforcement training is going to be able to allow you to experience those types of behaviors positively in a great light. but also be able to have your bird comfortable
Mhm.
and control.
Yep.
So it is a full circle.
Yep.
Most of it's common sense.
Yes.
I shouldn't say most. That was a very cynical thing
It
to say,
is.
but a lot of what we talk about, if you really think about it, this is stuff that you should
It
be thinking about before you come, if you
yes.
know what I'm getting at.
Mhm. And I think people would go into it if they with a more natural kinda common sense point of view, but they get weighed down or bogged down by the things they read online.
Yeah.
It's the culture around parrot ownership tends to be so negative, and I think in some ways that does help protect parrots, that it does emphasize that it's a lot of work and it's a huge commitment, but it's the negativity around the parrot being the problem is what we're really trying to prepare people for and
Yeah.
change. Often, a not so great experience with a companion parrot, well, not often, 100% of the time, a negative experience with a companion parrot or what you might perceive as undesirable behaviors is always going to be representative of the care that the human is providing.
Yep.
So when we make it this whole send home process more about the buyer than about the parrot and make it focused on what you should be doing as the bird owner versus what the parrot should be doing as a hand-fed baby, then again, I think you're going to experience a lot more success. When you're really mindful and have an awareness of the attitude you're projecting, the tone of voice you're using, the investment you've made in all of the products and the supplies necessary, all of those things are going to contribute to your success more than focusing, oh gosh, the bird looks fearful or the bird bit me or anything like that. You got to focus more on what you can control and the parrot's going to follow along.
Yeah, we do have a wonderful community. I mean, we're not putting all this stuff out
Mhm.
here. When I first started, I was like, whoa, this is a lot. But
Yeah,
then once I really got into the world of parrots, I'm like, wow, this might not be enough,
I know.
you know? But but we're not just throwing all this stuff at
Yeah.
you to, like you said, sit on a high horse or micromanage your relationship with your bird or
Mhm.
dictate or anything like that. And what I was saying when I first started, our community is great because we hear feedback. And these
Mhm.
are all things that have been proven for the most part to work and be the best options for your new parrot companion.
Yep.
So we say it all for a reason.
Yeah. And I think too, when it was just me and my mom when we first started, we we were having conversations with people, but it wasn't along with printed paperwork. It wasn't in this like formal send home setting. We didn't have all these like mandatory requirements that we made people aware of before they were coming into the store. And I think we did cure a lot of concerns after the bird would go home about
Yeah.
behavior and everything. And although we do keep that open door policy and we really encourage people to call us back, I can proudly say that the volume of people that are really struggling after they go home with their companion parrot has decreased
Yeah.
significantly. And that was my hope and my goal is that like, okay, how can we just set people up for success? And I think it does help and it does work. And that's why I'm so hopeful that other breeders and stores or whoever the seller is of a parrot will kind of adopt a lot of these concepts and these standards because it really does help people be more successful. It has a huge impact on people's perception of their parrot when they go home. And I think it is really helping people and improving the culture. And yeah, the community is phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
every day that passes, the positivity and the way people are talking about their parrots, I can feel it and I can hear it. It's getting better.
Yeah.
It's more about the goofy, the funny, the sweetness rather than like the bitey, the
And that is,
feisty, the
yeah, that's
hormonal.
something we never, I guess we are victims of the parrot community sometimes because we do always tend to just talk about that stuff.
Mhm.
Like,
The negative, yeah.
yeah, well, we talk about the negative stuff positively.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So,
Yes.
like, yes, you read stuff out there that's like the bird's gonna bite you, but then we're like, well, that's not gonna happen. But we don't talk about enough about the whole reason
Mhm.
of getting a parrot companion, of like the goofy kayaks, the awesome experiences, the funny,
Mhm.
the talking. The bird will literally have a conversation with you, all that fun
The
stuff.
cognitive companion.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. Yeah. Sometimes during that send home process, like what I was saying earlier, we understand that it can be, it's a lot
Mhm.
of information. Don't get me wrong. And we
Mhm.
say it all for obviously for reasons that we said, but sometimes we do never hear from,
Mhm.
unfortunately, we do never hear from people ever again
Mhm.
for whatever reason. And we just want to know that we did our best.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is it can be overwhelming in the sense like, oh God, this is a
Mhm.
lot of stuff to remember when I get this bird home. I can barely look at it or like, without it shattering to pieces or going
Yep.
crazy. That's not that is not what we're trying to say. That's all about having the best experience for the next on average 30,
Mhm.
40, 50, 60, 70 years.
Yep. And I say this phrase at nauseum. You probably are so sick of me saying it, but I think there's just no other way of saying it. But every component of parrot ownership, if you envision it as it's a marathon, not a sprint,
Mhm.
it really helps put things into perspective, and it's applicable to the purchase process as well. It does not have to be a rushed decision. Just because
Yeah.
you have a week off work and kids are on break or whatever, that doesn't mean that you have to rush into the decision. We're willing to take as much time with you as you need to think through all of the elements. So after listening to this episode, or you've come into the store and we kind of put all this on you and we say, "Oh gosh, there's going to be quite a bit that you're going to need to learn prior to letting you take the bird home." If that does feel overwhelming or if you seem like a lot, there's no reason we can't break it into smaller sections. We can maybe spend a day with you working on the cage, spend a day working with you on the training and the take home stuff, spend another day on the food and the nutrition. There is no right or wrong way to do it as long as we are making sure that we're going over each topic.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind too. We are not going to pressure or force you into it just to kind of conserve time or help you make a decision before you're ready. We want you to tell us the pace that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah. I mean, from the even the budgies, from the budgies to the macaws, we
Mhm.
spend equal amount of time
Yep.
with
That's
you.
a good point too.
Sure, maybe the $35,000 hyacinth will take extra
Yeah,
will
we're
take
usually
extra
spending weeks with
extra
that person, yes.
precautions and a very long drawn out period, but for necessary reasons. But for every species is the same
Mhm.
to us. They all are as equally
Important.
yes, important to us and we'll spend as much time as we need for anybody.
Yeah.
And it's not all clicky information where you have to purchase to get the
Oh, that's a good
information.
point.
We will hand out all this stuff to you willy nilly if you
Mhm.
ask for it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, if you wanna come to the store and if you already have your bird and you're like, "Gosh, nobody told me anything when I bought my bird. I just went into whatever big box store it was."
mhm.
You went in there, you ran your credit card, now you left with this really intelligent, very complex animal that you now have to share your home with for 45 years. You still can come to us and we can treat you as though you're somebody that bought a bird from us. I mean, there's no monopoly over this information. It is free to anybody that wants it. So if you want a point by point of our requirements, they are available on our website.
Yeah.
We are slowly improving the website to be a little bit more cohesive with the actual verbiage we use in the store. So we are creating a true what to expect section of the website. There's already a tab on the website now, but it will continue to have more information added to it over time. And then, of course, you can always call, email us, follow us on social media because we are almost always reiterating our requirements over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
it's easy to find them if you don't have them, if you want to kind of read through them and kind of make a little personal checklist for yourself. But keep in mind, we will still make sure we make you really aware of the entire process before you're committed to going through the purchase of the bird. So there's as little surprise as possible for your experience.
So, a review
Yes.
real quick.
Good point. We should probably do a concise review.
Yeah. Because that was a lot. You might be like, what the heck am I getting into if I
Yeah.
go to Parrot Stars? No, you're getting into a lot of fun.
Yes.
Number 1, proof of cage. The
Mhm.
cage must be equipped with appropriate number of perches and toys, 4 to 6 at minimum of each of those.
Mhm.
Number 2, a clean, appropriately sized travel carrier.
Mhm.
Of course, all these items you can purchase at the store as well.
Mhm.
Number 3, required to purchase at minimum the food the bird is currently eating.
Mhm.
And number 4 is that sit down, send home process, which can be a lengthy process. Most people spend most of their day
Yeah.
with us, which is great.
Yeah. The Sun Home Talk is around 2 hours,
Yep.
start to finish. I think minimum you should plan to be in our store is 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
And again, we can split that up over different days, but there's been customers that have been there from when we open to when we close, and
Yep.
we love it.
Fast
That's what
close.
we want. So,
Yes. But
Just-
that's 1, 2, 3, and 4.
and then, okay, sorry, one last thing, and I promise we're done, is we've kind of made it sound like a lot of this has to do with in-store stuff. We do offer this for remote customers as well. So all the same content and requirements and evaluation of caging and all the things that we require, we can still format it to our customers that are not within driving distance also.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. We have a phone version, or if necessary, a video version, where even if you aren't physically in front of us, we still make sure that your experience, if you're in the store or at home because you can't make the drive in or you're too far away, we make sure that that experience feels identical for our in-store and our remote customers as well. Okay, so check it out on our website, parrotstars.com, or you can email us or come into the store. We now have this poster printed all over the store, so you can kind of refer to it
I
as
wanted
you're
it to
looking
be
around.
everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So, as always, guys, thank you so much for listening into our podcast. This was some thing somebody asked us for an episode, is like kind of go over what the purchase of a parrot would be at Parrot Stars. So
Yeah.
we're trying to really listen to you guys and feel out what you guys want to hear. So do not hesitate. Continue to throw ideas at us. You can send us emails or comment on YouTube if you have an idea or a topic that you want us to cover during our podcast. But we have some really cool episodes coming up for you guys.
Yeah, we're
We
excited.
can't wait.
It's going to be a really fun
So-
season.
Okay, well, as always, guys, if you can, please download, rate, and review our podcast. It makes a huge impact for us. It makes our podcast more visible to people. The more reviews and shares that it gets, downloads it gets, the more the greater the audience we reach. And then continue to follow along as we go through all of our different topics this season. So,
Yeah.
all right,
And
Avery.
I guess, or do you want to say it? Or do I
No,
say
you
it?
say it.
Okay. And as always, be kind to your parrot, and your parrot will be kind to you.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everybody.